Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, here it is. This is the massive low pressure system that last weekend caused so much problems from coast to coast. Big snows all the way out west, all the way to the northeast. Meanwhile, to the south, we had a severe weather outbreak bringing in quite a bit of unsettled weather. But for us in the Carolinas, this was mainly just a rainfall event followed by a big temperature change. So look at this. It's going from Saturday into Sunday, parts of North and South Carolina saw a 30 to 40 degree change in temperatures. And the reason why I take you just back a few days is because I want you to see that this is going to be the way of things as we finish out the month of January and start February. You see, this was the total accumulated precipitation from that big weather system we had last weekend. And why I show it to you is that this is the forecast for the next 10 days. And you almost see a very similar pattern. We picked up somewhere in the vicinity of a ½ inch to, in some locations, over an inch of precipitation here in parts of the Carolinas. And this is what we're going at over the next 10 days. And just so that you see, these red colors in here start off around the 2-inch mark. Now, what we need to do is understand this pattern that's going to keep us quite wet over the next 10 days or so and kind of finish off here, or continue, I should say, a very wet pattern we've had going back several months now. So let's get right on into it. This is the dominating thing affecting North American weather right now. You're looking here at the winds in the stratosphere, and this is a piece of the polar vortex. Now, the polar vortex has been disrupted. It is split. There's part of it there over parts of Siberia, and it's quite weak. And because of that, we are right now able to unleash quite a bit of cold air across the eastern part of North America. Now, you know, we always look at these maps that show us troughs and ridges because they help us understand the flow pattern of the atmosphere. But I'm just going to play this one forward for you so you can see the dominating features. Then we'll discuss it here in a few minutes. What do we see as we go through the next 15 days? We really see the dominance of that polar vortex until we get possibly into the beginning of February. Now, I'll tell you more about that in a few seconds. So what does all of that mean? Well, this next map that you see here kind of helps us understand what the storm track is going to be. Home base is going to be this deeper trough that will be sitting somewhere here over the Hudson Bay. We will see several little shortwave little Alberta clippers connected to that. They're going to run across the northern tier states. Overall, those aren't really going to affect the Carolinas, except they're going to be the mechanism by which we could deliver some pretty cold air. We're going to see a storm system taking shape in the Central Plains Monday, Tuesday, and racing off to the northeast. That'll drag another cold front here through the Carolinas. And then I'm watching a big coastal low in this area getting set up around the 27th and 28th. That's going to be a major player. So you can kind of see they're all getting focused here in the northeast. Meanwhile, the west coast sees this bigger ridge. Now, what does all that mean? Well, looking out over the next 15 days in terms of precipitation patterns, we see a wetter bias through this whole area. And you just saw that a few moments ago. So that is the name of the game. Now, several large low pressure systems will each have a very strong temperature gradient associated with them. So expect big changes in temperatures like you saw this past weekend. And also, I'm also seeing some very strong winds with each one of these systems. So big question is, before we get into the detailed part of this forecast, is this kind of pattern going to last deep into February? Now, we see that the polar vortex is going to be keeping this region cooler than average. But you see, if you want to bring that cold air really into the deep, east-southeast, we need to see something different. Right now, what will be dominating our pattern is this ridge that's established over Alaska. And that just kind of keeps the cold air wrapped around back into this area. Now, if we see by the time we get into February that the models keep strengthening this ridge kind of over Greenland, that changes everything, and that allows the cold air to spill from the Hudson here into the northeast, across the Great Lakes, and really change things in terms of our pattern going into February. This is not a warm pattern that you're seeing here, but it has the potential to be quite cold. As it stands, the European model and its ensembles kind of wash everything out into a more zonal pattern, which means while over the next 15 days things are quite active and at times very cold, we may transition into February going back into what I would just say is a more normal wintertime pattern. But the colder air that snuck in over the weekend, watch this. As I just animate out for you, these are temperature anomalies. Watch the roller coaster ride we've got going on there for the Carolinas. See that? We just get a brief blast of warm air, brought in with some precipitation that just goes into a cold pattern. This is just going to be the up-down nature of our pattern moving forward. So I know I kind of played it out for you all together there, but you can see here that polar vortex feature creating that deeper trough over north central Canada is the main culprit. Now look at this though. By the time we get out to the start of February, remember I said things may try to go back more toward a bit normal? We're just going to have to see if we can bring in a big enough high pressure center over Greenland to let that colder air sink farther to the south and east, or if as the model is currently forecasting, we maybe retain it more in the north central part of the United States, in the northeast. That's the unknown. We're going to watch it very carefully over the coming days. But let's talk about what we're looking at over the next 10 days first. Beginning here as we get into the week, let's see what we've got starting off on Tuesday. So here we are on Tuesday, middle of the day. High pressure dominates the East Coast, so that's still the colder air that's in place, but wrapping around that into this low pressure center that's kind of taken shape here in parts of Kansas is our next big player. Now, therefore, the start of the week, relatively cold and dry, but watch what happens as I get here into Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning. Now look at this. The high pressure center slides off the coast. It's now sitting over here, and because of that, we're now bringing that moisture right up the East Coast. And so it's going to be middle of the week by the time we get to our next chances for precipitation. So this is Wednesday morning. This is now getting into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, Thursday. Now look at what's going on Thursday. Bringing in quite a bit of rainfall toward the end of your week into Thursday. And then I want you to see this. On the back side of this, see how we switch over quickly to snow? Just like you saw with this past weekend, we're going to be bringing in a very quick shot at some cold air right there. And it's going to be windy as you start off or finish the day on Thursday and start off the day on Friday. Now look at this. Things relatively dry as we work into the weekend, but another system comes through. This is now Saturday evening, getting into Sunday, and that's the big one I want to talk about right there. You see, we've got some pretty good forecast confidence that getting into the overnight hours on Sunday night and then getting into next Monday morning, we will be seeing the development. And I'll talk about this in great detail in my next video update that's coming out, but it'll be coming in here on Monday morning. And watch this. This one goes racing up the East Coast. So this is going to be one of those cold rain events. It's going to start off warm, but then switch over very quickly as we develop this new nor'easter that's going to run up the East Coast here by the time we get into fully in the day on Monday. So you see what you got? You got these three systems coming through that are keeping things relatively wet. Now, let me transition to South America because we've got to be talking about the crops we grow in the Carolinas as they're being grown around the rest of the world. So let's now talk about cotton and corn and soybeans. In South America, we have a relatively weak Brazilian monsoon, and it's been weak since much of December. Meanwhile, in Argentina, things have been wet. So what we're talking about here, first crop soybeans, then we're going into a second crop or a safrinha crop, cotton and corn inside of that circle that I just kind of put an X in there. And what does the model show? Just finish the month of January to begin February, things are dry. Now, how dry have they been? Well, Mato Grosso, this is a big cotton producing state, also big corn and soybeans. They've built up an 8-inch total rainfall deficit over the last 45 days or so. Now, it still is raining there, but it is below average. The monsoon is weak. Let me take you to Mato Grosso do Sul, which is here. They grow a lot of corn and soybeans in that area. They've lost about 4 inches compared to average. Take you down here into Paraná, big soybean and corn producing area. They're also about 4 inches in deficit. Meanwhile, in Argentina, it's been very stormy, big rainfall events, and they've now picked up a surplus. So South America is about the exact opposite of what it was a year ago, where we had drought in Argentina and it was quite wet through much of Brazil. Now, why is this going on? Well, if we want to keep the Brazilian monsoon strong and things wet, which means big cotton crops, big corn crops, and big soybean crops, we got to keep the Mad-Julian Oscillation, which is the most closely tied circulation to what goes on in Brazil, in phases 8, 1, and 2, way over here. What have we done since mid-December? We've spent our time doing this. You see it stayed over here in phases 3, 4, 5 throughout December. Then as we started January, 6, 7, briefly into 8, but low amplitude back into the null phase. We just popped out over here into phase 4, and we're going to go phase 5, 6, and 7. So see, we're not over here where we need to be, which again, phase 2, Phase 8, phase 1 where things are wet in Brazil. So that's why they're seeing that drier monsoonal flow. Talking about Australia, because we're down here now talking about a cotton crop as well, what we see is that let's just start off with Monday, Tuesday, scorching heat for the cotton in here, and we're looking at a drier pattern over the next 10 days where we grow a lot of that cotton, which is right in through this area. So I wanted to kind of give you that global perspective here just to kind of match up with some crops we grow here in the Carolinas around the rest of the world, which will certainly influence our markets. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We want to thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to our next update coming out next week. Thank you.